What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic Best Ball channel. Yes, Stochastic. Osmo is undergoing a rebrand to Stochastic, but it is all the same tools, same personalities, same analysis. Just check out the new site to get everything you know and love. Today on the Best Ball channel, we are doing another player debate. It is Christian McCaffrey versus Jonathan Taylor. And if you've ever had the number one overall pick, you've certainly struggled with this dilemma. With me to discuss this is Nick Lepri on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. Nick, how are you doing today?
I am doing excellent today, and I'm pretty excited to talk about this topic. These seem to be the clear number one and number two overall picks, and I'd say 99% of drafts, every single draft I have done, people have went this way, unless someone's a little bit high on Cooper Kupp, then maybe he goes into the top two, but it seems like the number one and number two pick, basically every single time, are Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, and I think you and I have a very unique perspective on this that I haven't heard a lot in the industry. Usually it's just people planting their flag in one or the other, but we'll get into that. Before we do, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. And check out our sponsor, Underdog. We are going to be referencing their ADP throughout the show. They are the title sponsor, and we'll talk a little bit about them later and throughout the video, as they are the best place to do these summer best ball drafts. But we're going to lay out the bull case, the bear case for each of these players and give you our final takes. What do you think about starting with the number one overall player, Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, that makes the most sense. Let's do it that way.
Okay, so he's number one in terms of ADP on Underdog, 1.1 overall, number one RB. Makes a lot of sense. Last year, 19.5 carries per game, finishes with over 1,800 rushing yards, averaged 3 targets per game, 360 receiving yards. A solid step forward for him there. Extremely efficient. And not too much change on this Indianapolis offense. Their offensive line still should be towards the top of the NFL. And if anything, they just got a significant improvement in Matt Ryan. So I think the bull case for Taylor is pretty straightforward. This guy leads the NFL in rushing again, and he stays healthy. What do you think about Taylor? Lay out the bull case for me.
Yeah, the bull case is he's very fucking good, right? Averaging over 100 rushing yards last year. He's going to average around, I would say, 19, 20, 21 carries per game. And then he gets the receiving yards. Now, he's not like Derrick Henry necessarily, where he's going to see like 40 targets, but he's also not like Christian McCaffrey, where he could see 100 targets if he's healthy. So obviously, in terms of the receiving value, Jonathan Taylor isn't this crazy receiving running back, but what he is this dominant in between the tackles running back. And I believe that Jonathan Taylor is just very safe because they have one of the better offensive lines in the league. Like you said, going from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan is a big step up, in my opinion. I understand Matt Ryan did not look very good last year, right, in Atlanta. But what was he given? In reality, nothing. Calvin Ridley was too busy betting on the games to show up, and now he's suspended for the whole year. You know, things went sour for the Atlanta Falcons. Cordero Patterson was one of the best players on their team, so you know things went upside down for the team. So I'm pretty confident with Matt Ryan moving over to the Indianapolis Colts. Wentz wasn't as bad as people kind of have been throwing at him, but he wasn't that great. I think Matt Ryan is definitely a step up. And we have seen Matt Ryan in the past with other running backs, like remember Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman. He was dumping the ball off to them. So it's not like Matt Ryan isn't afraid to dump the ball off. So I'm pretty confident with Jonathan Taylor. It is very hard to poke any holes in Jonathan Taylor based upon what we saw last year. So I'm very confident yet again with him. And it was shocking that he went in the second round last year, even after all of the news about how, oh, he's going to be perfectly healthy, blah, blah, blah. People still kind of stayed away from him.
Yeah, to that, I think people were just looking back at the old timeshare with Nyheim Hines and projecting it forward. A common mistake people use in fantasy football is just looking at exactly what happened last year and expecting the exact same thing to happen again this year. Players take a step forward. We'll talk about a lot of players like Javonte Williams in future videos, but I think just looking back at timeshares that previously existed and expecting them to transpire moving forward is kind of a little bit of a faulty reasoning here. With Taylor, I think the only concern could be a skew towards like a pass heavier system. When you look at them last year, they were 28th in overall pass rate because they were in a lot of positive game scripts. When you look at their pass rate in neutral game scripts, it was 21st. Now, Nyheim Hines is involved in the pass game. He plays mostly in like 2-minute type stuff. He was handling the third down work at the beginning of the year, but then we saw a stark split around the midpoint of the year where Jonathan Taylor took over the third down duties on some down and distance, which is really important because it separates him from the Nick Chubbs, the Josh Jacobs of the world, and gives him a path to some target volume, which means he can pretty clearly finish as the RB1 without just crazy anomaly seasons in terms of touchdown rate. So I love that for Taylor. I've tried to skew that as a negative, but ultimately I think a move towards a more pass-friendly system could potentially help him because of his recent involvement in the pass game. What do you think about any potential negatives that there might be for Taylor?
Yeah, the only negative I've seen about Jonathan Taylor is that Frank Reich himself said that he would draft Naheem Hines in fantasy football, but don't believe that one bit. I don't even think he was being truthful when he said that. I think Jonathan Taylor is the clear number one running back here. He is the workhorse running back on this team. And to be honest with you, there really are no negatives unless maybe Matt Ryan really is just ass, right? And last year wasn't an anomaly. And it wasn't just the Falcons. It's just that he's not good anymore. But to be honest, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and I think he's very deserving of being a top three back. A lot of times we see volatility in this range due to injury. You and I aren't in the business of projecting injuries, so like he could finish all of the board. And two players we've seen drafted at the top of the drafts recently have gotten injured, and it has been a huge problem. And now there's kind of a stink on their name. And one of those players is Christian McCaffrey. He's the other player we're going to talk about in the dichotomy of this video. But before we get started with McCaffrey, let's talk about Underdog. We've been referencing them all throughout the show. They are the title sponsor of the video, and they are the best place to play fantasy football in the summer. They unveiled Best Ball Mania 3 earlier this year, which is a tournament that has $10 million in total prizes. And all you have to do is draft your team. That's it. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog gives you the best score every single week, and then the highest score at the end of the year wins. Last year's Best Ball Mania championship team was drafted in June, so there's no time to wait. We just crossed into July. Make sure to take advantage of those drafts. And better yet, Underdog doubles your first deposit up to $100 when you use the promo code AWESEMO. That's good for 4 entries into Best Ball Mania 3. Again, all you have to do is head to UnderdogFantasy.com, the App Store, or click the link in the video description below. Use that promo code AWESEMO and take advantage of your $100. All right, getting to McCaffrey. He is coming off the board with an ADP of 3.0, the RB2, the number 2 pick in most drafts. You mentioned it. Sometimes Cooper Kupp goes ahead of him, but generally it's Christian McCaffrey at RB2. We know the reasons why he's drafted so high. It's the workload. It's the volume in the pass game. He still averaged 5.9 targets per game last year, albeit in a shortened season. We'll get to the negatives later, so lay out the bull case for me with McCaffrey.
Yeah, the bull case is going to be that he stays healthy and does exactly what he's done his whole career, which is just dominate, right? This is one of those guys that can get 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards. I understand Mono Boy Sam Darnold is his starting quarterback, but I could be the starting quarterback, and I would be 100% convinced that Christian McCaffrey could be one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in fantasy football. How much of a gap is between these two guys, Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey, is also another debate. Is it going to be 2 points per game, 3 points per game, or is it going to be half a point per game? And at the end of the season, we're like, wow, this debate was fucking stupid, which is probably what I think is going to end up being the case, if I'm being honest with you. I think Christian McCaffrey, despite the quarterback play, despite the team that he's on, I'm just very confident in him. I don't think the team is going to magically just regress into giving him not as high of a workload. He is just every time he's on the field, you're going to see this guy make some amazing plays. So I'm very comfortable with McCaffrey. He wasn't amazing last year. He was running back 8 in points per game, but you can attribute that to the fact that he wasn't even playing all these games, right? He played in 7 total games. In 2 of the games, I'm pretty sure he got hurt before the first half even finished. So when he's healthy, he's probably going to be the number 1 running back in fantasy football. So it's just, there's really nothing negative to say about, or nothing not positive to say about him unless you bring up the injury.
And that's where we'll go next. You have to start the negative conversation, the bear case with the injuries. Yeah. To me, I'm not a doctor and I'm not in the business of predicting injuries. He's played 10 games over the last 2 years, and he's received that injury-prone label. Now, I firmly disagree with this. You've either played long enough in the NFL to get injured, or you're just too young in your career. Christian McCaffrey had 3 straight seasons without missing a single game, and he's gotten injured in the last 2. You look at all the other players that have played for more than 3 seasons in the NFL. Derrick Henry, season-ending injury last year. Dalvin Cook, multiple injuries. Joe Mixon, he's been banged up. Austin Eckler, he's gotten hurt at times. It's just something that happens to players. So predicting who they're going to occur to and when they're going to happen, I don't care about that. I'm still going to shoot for the ceiling with McCaffrey. The more interesting talking point, in my opinion, is just how bad this Carolina team is going to be. Is he going to be a Najee Harris type player where, sure, he's like a top 5 back off raw, raw target volume, raw carry volume, but on a per game basis, it's not that great. And you might want to have other players later in drafts that, maybe they're hurt for 4 games, but when they're on the field for those 13, they give you a chance to actually win your weeks. The offense is a bigger concern for me. It's a terrible offensive line. You already mentioned Darnold. He's horrific. And then this team really has no incentive to like go out there and use McCaffrey. You could spin that 2 ways. Maybe they run him into the ground. Maybe they try to keep him fresh and use him as trade bait in the offseason. I don't know what's going to happen, but the offense being terrible is a concern. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the offense, I feel like they haven't been great like the whole time McCaffrey's been here, right? This is kind of like the tail end of that Cam Newton era with McCaffrey. McCaffrey's played good with Kyle Allen, I'm pretty sure was the starting quarterback of the Panthers at some point, and Christian McCaffrey was still good. So I'm just not too worried at all. The injury concern, I understand he got banged up a couple of times prior to these last 2 seasons, but he never missed a game. He had a back sprain, a shoulder strain, a knee strain, foot strain, and it never really mattered. If you guys have ever watched a UFC fight where guys are just beating the shit out of each other for 3 full rounds, this is what his body chart looks like on his injuries, because there's nowhere where he's just getting plowed repeatedly, right? It's not like he tore his ACL a couple of times. No, it's scattered all around his body, except for the concussion. His head is looking perfectly fine on this picture I'm looking at right now. But none of these things are connected. Again, Matt just talked about it before. I'm not a doctor. Matt's not a doctor. Most of the people that talk about Christian McCaffrey are not fucking doctors. And when you read what actual doctors have to say, no one seems to be very concerned about McCaffrey. A couple of years ago, McCaffrey is this Iron Man. McCaffrey is this guy that doesn't get hurt. In the last 2 years, that has been dribbled around and thrown out the window. So I think McCaffrey is going to be just fine. Again, the only worry, like you said, really is the fact that the team's so shit. But even with the team being so bad, he's still been great. So I'm just not really that concerned with Christian McCaffrey. He is my number 3 running back, though, behind Austin Eckler. But I think I'm going to have to move Christian McCaffrey up the more I keep talking myself into him.
All right, let's talk some strategy. First of all, you're doing one draft. You're on the clock with the number 1 pick. Who are you taking?
Yes. Is this a redraft league or a best ball league?
Best ball.
In best ball, I think I would probably still take Jonathan Taylor, but it is very close if you're only doing one draft, because in one draft is going to be the argument we're both going to talk about here, is that you are hunting for the most upside. You're not necessarily going for the safer player.
Right. So in one draft, I think McCaffrey has the higher ceiling. I'm playing for a full season. I'm anticipating McCaffrey playing all the games, and I'm anticipating him being that 1,000 player we saw a few seasons ago. Again, he's only 26, so it's not like he's 30 years old at the running back position. He's been banged up, but he's 26 years old. Now, if you're doing multiple drafts, which this is on the Best Ball channel, many of you are, I'm letting my draft position dictate a lot of my strategy. If I'm number 1, I'm taking Taylor, because I don't have that many opportunities to get the number 1 overall pick. And because Taylor goes there and he rarely falls, it's not like I can be picking at number 3 and get Taylor. That's just not going to happen a lot. So if I have number 1 in best ball and I'm doing a bunch of drafts, I'm just taking Taylor and I'm letting myself get McCaffrey when I naturally end up with the 2 or the 3 pick. What do you think of that, about that strategy? Because it's kind of different. It's not really player take related. It's all this game theory involved.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The odds you get the number 1 overall pick a lot of times is not going to be very high. And when you're drafting number 1, you just have to take Taylor because, like you said, Taylor's not going to fall to 3, 4, or 5. I've seen McCaffrey fall to pick 3, 4, or 5, but you're not going to see that with Jonathan Taylor. You want to make sure that when you are the number 1 guy, if you're going to do 20, 25 drafts, that you take Jonathan Taylor every single time, because there's never going to be that draft where you get the value on Jonathan Taylor unless you're just drafting with some guy, some airhead who drafts like Pat Mahomes number 1. But that's probably not going to happen. I've never seen that happen in any of my drafts. Jonathan Taylor goes number 1 every single time. So take Jonathan Taylor there and then get in your Christian McCaffrey at pick 2, 3, or 4 when he falls.
For sure. And for redraft, it's probably the same thing at number 1. I think Taylor's probably a little safer. You're playing more for safety in redraft. There's honestly an argument that can be made that you just take Dalvin Cook number 1 and then you draft Alexander Madison as the handcuff, because Taylor and McCaffrey don't have clear handcuffs behind him. He's not the topic of this video, but for me, if I had one draft in redraft specific, I would probably take Taylor. What do you think?
Yeah, in redraft, I'm also taking Jonathan Taylor. I'm just playing it safe. I feel like, again, in reality, Jonathan Taylor hasn't been in the league for that long. So just like your moniker, maybe he just hasn't been playing long enough to get hurt yet. But Jonathan Taylor is just such a safe running back. He's on a team with a great offensive line, with a team that's going to commit to running the football, at least a decent amount. Maybe their pass plays per game does increase like you talked about. I could definitely see that happening as well. But Jonathan Taylor just screams safety. He's basically like a condomat. He's just super safe. So I love Jonathan Taylor, and I'm very excited about him this year.
Yeah, and I mean, one last thing, like people will point to McCaffrey, say he's 26. Yeah, but he has so much wear in his tires from his Stanford days. Jonathan Taylor had 3 consecutive seasons in college with Wisconsin where he had 300 plus touches. It Wisconsin's. I mean, this guy, he's very young too, but you can make the same argument for Taylor. At the end of the day, Nick and I are both going Jonathan Taylor if we are on the clock with the #1 overall pick. Let us know if you differ. Let us know if you would take a different running back and what you think of the video overall. We would love to hear it, and we'll certainly get back for you. I am Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. He is Nick Lepri on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy on the screen in front of you. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a thumbs up on the way out, and we will see you again next time.